Okay, we are now live.
Thanks, Max. All right, good afternoon, members, and particularly our visitor. Welcome to this session of our Restoring Our Rivers Task Group. Mr. Pemberton, if you would like to do a brief intro of yourself, and then I'll go around those members that are online just to let you know where they're from, basically. Just a quick round of introductions.
Lovely, thank you very much. Hi, yeah, I'm Ian Pemberton. I am an engineer with Ofwat, with 30 years under the tooth, long in the tooth, water sector engineering. I joined Ofwat about 5 years ago. I currently sit in the environment team, and I am, one of my roles is I'm the storm overflows lead for Wales. But I work on closely with my my colleague who's the storm overflows lead for England. So I can give you a perspective on what's going on, but I'm only one voice in a large organisation.
Thanks very much for that. I'm going to go around the screen as I've got them. I'll start with David William. If you want to introduce yourself again, David.
Yep. Thank you, Chair. I'm Councillor David Willingham. I am a councillor for St Mark's and St Peter's in Cheltenham. I have the River Chelt running through the division I represent, and I have the Arle CSO discharging into the River Chelt just upstream of St Peter's Park. So obviously quite interested in holding Severn Trent to account for that.
Thanks, David. Afternoon, Kate.
Chair. Hi, Ian. I'm Kate Cody, and I'm the County Councillor here in Tewkesbury. We have the Severn and the Avon where they meet, and as I've said before, usual issues of sewage, agriculture, and plastics.
Graham.
Yeah, Ian. Graham Morgan, County Councillor for Sinniford Division in the Forest of Dean.
Thank you. Stephen, are you with us?
Which one?
Yeah. Certainly yourself as the councillor first, and then if Stephen wants to introduce himself as a researcher, then fine. Yeah, go ahead, Stephen.
Am I mute? No, I'm not. Good afternoon. My name's Stephen Hurst. I represent the Tetbury division in the County Council. Tetbury, who claims to have the source of the Avon in the countryside around the town. Good afternoon.
Yeah, Stephen, by all means, if you want to introduce yourself and your role in this.
Yeah, very briefly. So, Stephen, lovely to see you all. I'm the political assistant for the Lib Dem group.
Have I missed anybody apart from myself? Oh, Susan Williams. Sorry, Susan. Suzanne.
She's having technical issues again. We spoke
this
briefly
morning
before.
Okay. No doubt she'll come back in. I'm Phil Orford. I represent a division called Hynham, which is a bit misleading. It's 21 parishes, basically, most of them on the banks of either side of the River Severn, and dare I say geographically just below Kate, where of course the Avon also comes into the Severn catchment. So that's the team. I believe you've got a presentation for us.
If I unmute myself, yes, I have. I will whiz through. I don't want to give you death by PowerPoint on a Friday afternoon, but if I can whiz through some of the stuff here, it might answer some of your questions. And I guess, how would you like to do it? I'm more than happy with an interaction. Put your hand up, interrupt, take things as you come, or however you want to play it, how you normally do operate.
Well, that's refreshing because, if we get hands up at key points in what you're saying, that saves us doing a round robin at the end where people are trying to remember what they wanted to ask questions on. So, if you're content with that, then by all means,
do. Yeah, please just butt in and or whatever your decorum is. Hands up through the chair, whatever works for you. So I will share a presentation, which I think, I mean, I've sent on to Sophie, and hopefully I would presume that she has fired onto you. Can
yes, we've got it.
Are you seeing a
Introduction?
Is that insufficient detail? That's the question, really.
Yes, that's fine.
Lovely, right, fantastic. So really what I want to do is to cover off 3 areas this afternoon. Is what we do and what we don't do, and then really how we do it and how we promote and stimulate the companies to do what we want them to do, and society's objectives. We are a arm's length body associated to DEFRA, and we are governed through a strategic policy statement, a strategic priority statement, SPS, set for by DEFRA and by the Welsh Government in Wales. They give us guidance and they give us some powers to create secondary legislation, but we are an independent body, and fiercely so. We're the economic regulator of the water and sewage companies, formed by the Water Industries Act in '91. We've got some very specific powers, what we can do and what we can't do. As economists, as I said, I joined 5 years ago as an engineer, and you learn from economists. Economists love a free market, they love competition, they love quasi-market conditions. So given that we are regulating a monopoly provider of water and sewage functions, they have tried to create quasi-market conditions by which companies that deliver what customers want will flourish, and those that don't will be penalised. We have some very specific powers under Water Industries Act, some under the Competitions Act as well. But primarily, we set the outcomes that we want the companies to achieve. We absolutely don't tell them how to do that. We tell them what good looks like on the basis of. So we don't even tell them. We agree with them in their business plans what good looks like and what we would expect to see from them. As I said, we have got some appeals, dispute resolution powers. We certainly can take enforcement action. 2 of the largest you may have heard of very recently, Thames Water, were fined over £100 million for failure to achieve their leakage target, and Southern Water, again, similar sorts of numbers for difficulties and complications and misreporting in their wastewater performance. Just as a point of interest and principle, really, we tend not to do the fines. We do that nominal fine of £1 if we can, and get what's called a Section 19 undertaking, so that the company doesn't then get a criminal prosecution. They undertake to do something which is in the customer's interest. Because if we were to issue a fine, that money would come straight into us and go straight back to the Treasury, and customers would end up paying that fine on behalf of it is much better and much more effective to get an undertaking. So when I say there are fines, take it in the broader context. Our secondary duties include water supply licenses, resilience, and around price fixing and price charges. But the fundamental message there is that we are the customer. The customers are our customers. We are the customer's voice, and it's making sure that the water companies, deliver what customers expect. We do that. We have got a number of environmental duties under Section 3 of the Water Industries Act, and have a duty to to the environment and towards resilience. I believe you've already heard from other statutory bodies, such as the Environment Agency, for those that are bordering on bordering onto Wales, NRW, and the Drinking Water Inspectorate. I think the important thing here, but the message I really want to get across is what is within our power, what we can do, and what we can do to influence, and what we are doing. What has already happened and what is going to be happening as a result of the recent cases and the recent interest and the Environment Bill. The Environment Agency are responsible for environmental standards and water quality standards in the natural environment, and the Drinking Water Inspectorate is responsible for the standards under, as it says, in drinking water. So how do we do that? We have a 5-year rolling cycle of business plans, the so-called AMP period, asset management periods, AMP. And we're currently just entered AMP 7, obviously the 7th one since privatisation in '89. It's within our power to determine what the periodic review period will be, and we consult on it at the moment every 5 years. We believe that 5 years is the right timescale for the water sector. There's nothing in statute that says it must be 5 years, but it just seems to work. Given that a lot of the investment that we expect companies to make is very long term, in some ways to have much longer periods would be more appropriate. However, if you make it much longer, then the ability to sort of react to customer beliefs and customer changes and perceptions, world economic market, we couldn't have predicted the energy prices being where they are at the moment. We couldn't have predicted COVID and the impacts of that. So if you set a longer review period, then it has knock-on impacts. Similarly, if you set a much shorter period, the companies don't really get any time to bed in, and they've always got one eye on the fact that we could set different standards in a couple of years. So 5 years seems to work for us. We have just had a price review in 2019 for a period. So the AMP 7 period started on April 1st, 2020. And we have set expectations of what we want the companies to deliver in those times. And there's two things I want to come on now. One is the basis of the price control, and then how we put the pain gain mechanism in place to do that. Okay, the slide slightly out of kilter there. There's two elements to what we do. We ask the companies to set the objectives that they want, that their customers expect of them, and there are differences. In areas on the south coast, there may be higher pressure on water resources, so they might be more interested in water efficiency and bathing waters. In areas of high water resource, they may be more interest in environmental standards. So I think that there is a base level of requirement that each of us in the UK has, in England and Wales has, as wanting its customers. Excuse me one second. And we do two processes, which is to make sure that the company's business plans to deliver what the customers expect is efficient. There's an econometric benchmarking process. So we create a series of econometric models, which would say, the technical term is exogenous factors. So for example, the the population served might be exogenous. So it's not within the company's control how many people live in that geographic boundary that they serve, but it would be one of the drivers that will drive the cost of their business and the cost to deliver. And there's some 40-50 models which are built econometrically, pumping costs, distance to discharge for sewage effluent to land or to incineration, all those sort of things. So it gives a good econometric benchmark as to what an efficient cost would be. So that's against each other and also against some external factors. But then the really important one for us is that the companies should be engaging with customers, finding out what the outcomes that they want the companies to achieve, and setting themselves stretching targets for those. So if you are, it's a classic example in the high street there, when you or I are walking down the street, we can vote with our feet and we can vote with our pound whether we want to go to shop A or shop B. Whether we want to shop at all, we vote with our feet. When it comes to our water and sewerage, any monopoly provider, we don't have that option. So this is a way of setting the objectives. There's 2 points that I want to make here. Is then, so we set at the last price review, we set a series of performance commitments. We set 14 common performance commitments that we wanted all of the sector to achieve, which is, let's take one there, per capita consumption. So actually it's a measure which we can say across the whole of the UK, across England and Wales, we would expect you to be able to monitor, report, and to deliver efficient levels of water. We would expect you to be able to do it for number 12 there, for you to be in control of your assets in a way such that the numbers and the duration of unplanned outages are actually manageable. For the first time since privatisation at PR19, Price Review 19, the 2019 business plan, we also asked the companies to set their own performance commitments. And across the whole of England and Wales, there was something like 400 bespoke performance commitments. The companies have said, "This, we have engaged with our customers. This is important to our customers. We will deliver this." And then on the back of that, we set a target level for the company to achieve in that performance commitment. And we'll come on to environmental performance commitments in a short while. And then set a pain gain mechanism called the outcome delivery incentives. So basically, if a company says we will, wastewater pollution incidents, a classic example, we will deliver a X% reduction in wastewater pollution incidents, or we will deliver this number of pollution incidents, or specifics around phosphorus, nitrogen, microplastics, whatever it is they're going to do, we will do that. And then we through the price mechanism, through the incentive mechanisms, monitor the performance of that. If they outperform, then they are rewarded, and they're rewarded in being able to charge customers more. So they basically said, we have outperformed. The customers have said they want us to outperform, and they're willing to pay for us to outperform. It's a gain mechanism for them. The flip side of that is if they fail to perform, then there is a pain mechanism in that. And I think I've got a couple more on the approach to different cost type. Like I said, through these econometric models, you get to build up a picture of what it would cost to run an average company, and you should be able to say that if you were to take those exogenous factors, the population, the topography, the distance to treatment, all those sort of things, for Severn Trent, and convert them across into Anglian water or into Welsh water, put those same numbers into the model, it would tell you how much it would cost to run Severn Trent if it were geographically moved. That's the base costs. Given these objectives are now commitments that have been agreed with the customers and and agreed with ourselves, there may well be, and there are many occasions where the company says our customers now want something different. They want more. They want, maybe the Environment Agency puts a lower standard on a treatment works. Maybe the customers say, I'm not prepared to have hosepipe bans that frequently. I want more resilience in the supply. Maybe they say, I'm not prepared to put up with that level of leakage. I want it lower. So those things become enhancement, which is kind of like, I guess, thinking on my feet, you could liken it to the base cost is operating and running your house as it is at the moment. An enhancement cost would be you build an extension, or you do something new, or you kind of you do something different to the cost. I think you can see that would then be that there would be things where you're doing more. And the last one on that is cost adjustments and cost adjustment claims. So, for example, the classic one is wage costs in the southeast of England are higher. It costs you more to employ a meter reader in Brighton than it does in Middlesbrough, and therefore you need to take that into account in the total cost allowance. So that's how we build up the efficient, what we call TOTEX, total expenditure allowance. And then when it comes to the amount you build, you take your TOTEX, you look at the pain gain mechanism through the outcome delivery incentives, you take up an element of financing costs, and that tells you what revenue you're going to deliver. So as I said, we've just gone through a price review in 2019, and we've started into this asset management plan. So all of the water companies know what their expectations are for the next 5 years, and all of them have got an idea of what income they can generate if they deliver on their promises, and what the pain will be if they don't. No sooner have we got the PR19 business plan finalised, we start to consult on the process for the PR24 methodology, and those discussions are at their most vigorous at the moment, with a view that by the end of this year we will have had to finalise what the methodology will be for the next 5 years for 2024. So this is saying to the companies, when you submit your business plan, we're going to want you to look at river water quality improvement, and this is how it will be measured. So so it's case in point here. So during 2022, we will be consulting on the methodology as to what the measures and the metrics will need to be. So what we've got in the building blocks of base and enhancement costs, and what we've got in terms of the outcome delivery incentives, the pain gain mechanism, is really the nuts and bolts of how that outcome delivery incentive will be operating for the next price review. It's worth saying that I'm sure one of the questions that you will have on your minds will be, so we've got a problem here and now, what do we do about it? And what you're hearing from me is the money is fixed until 2024, and any kind of additional costs will be into future business plans. The companies they've got two programs that can. There's two options. One is they can do a thing called an IDOC, an interim determination of K. K is the the amount above RPI that the companies are allowed to increase their bills. It's a bit of a nuclear option. It's a bit of a sledgehammer process. So basically, the company has to say something substantial has happened since we put our business plan in place, and we now need you to reopen that process. Typically speaking, it's I think it's 10% of the company's revenue. It would have to be. They'd have to say. So if I don't know. Something that's materially has affected their operating costs by more than 10%. Something that has impacted their deliverables by more than 10%. They can go for an interim determination of K. And then the second area where there is additional funding is what's called the WINEP program, the Water Industry National Environment Program, and the NEP program in Wales. This is separate funding from the Environment Agency for delivery of environmental schemes. You are probably aware, I hope you're aware, that the Environment Agency has launched an investigation into the water sector for potential widespread breaches of their permits. We, at the same time, so Ofwat, the Environment Agency launched an investigation. We have issued a request for information to see whether or not there's anything that we would want to investigate using our powers. I can't tell you anything about that because I'm not part of the team that's doing it, and also you'll appreciate that it's an ongoing inquiry, and that even if I could, I couldn't. So that is ongoing. That some companies are better, that some companies are good, some companies are better than others, and some have really got some questions to answer. And I think it's we'll have to wait and see what comes out of particularly the Environment Agency's inquiry, and then from our side as to whether or not we then launch any enforcement action. It would be specific breaches of their commitments or their license conditions or their commitments under the Water Industries Act. So
do you want to take a breath there, Ian, so you can get a drink?
Yeah, sure.
And I'll just go round or look for any hands. I haven't seen any, but I've got one question that come across my mind straight away. When you talked about environment enhancements, given everything that's going on at the moment, if there are to be those enhancements for the environment, are you saying they've got to go into work plans now in time for 2024? Is that the way I read it?
It's yes and no. I sort of try and answer your question as directly as I can. The companies, we have set the expectations on the basis of the company's plans and the current legislation and current targets or current standards. There's a moot point as to whether or not the companies are acting illegally or are in breach of their standards. So if there is any suggestion of anything happening as a result of virus, then the companies will need to respond and deal with that immediately. If what is happening is a public perception change, or there is a secondary legislation so that either the Environment Agency or DEFRA sets new water quality standards, then the companies will then say, for us to go and achieve that will cost us X, and it would go into a future price review. So there's a kind of it's the jury's out as to whether or not if they are acting legally or otherwise at the moment.
Ultimately, the consumer will pay. Yeah.
I don't.
Yeah. Kate, you had your hands up. Kate, if you got a question there.
Yeah, thank you for the presentation. It seems to me that the main sort of culprits of all of this, the sort of big four, I guess, would be, you know, sewage and its associated outdated infrastructure and capacity issues, and agriculture, as we heard earlier today, chemicals from households, not mine, I hasten to add, and industry, and sort of microplastics. And every time we speak to someone, it's all about, well, the EA has responsibility for that, but they're massively underfunded. They have fewer staff than I think they've ever had before. Now, the water companies are being fined, and obviously we read all about that in the news, etc. But as you pointed out, and we're aware of, those fines go directly to government coffers instead of. Can it not be? Is there nothing you can do? It's probably no is the answer, but can it not be diverted? You know, back into, for want of a better word, the waterworks and the system that we need it in. The second question is about dividends. We're also aware that we've spoken to Thames Water, Severn Trent, and Wessex, and Wessex Water, I think it was, don't give their shareholders dividends. They reinvest their money, their profits. Is there anything you can do to encourage all the water companies to do that? Because it is about money, but you know, consumers, individuals do have responsibilities. As the public, we have the responsibility not to ever use wet wipes anyway, but certainly not to flush them down the loo. You know, not to litter, not to put oil down our sink, and even we've learnt here not to put the washing on or dishwashers or whatever when it's raining. There's and to have more water butts and to stop concreting over our drives and green spaces, etc. So there are things that we can do, but I think it, just to hammer the consumer, it wouldn't be a great idea to do that at the moment with energy prices and all the rest of it going up anyway. We are aware that this costs billions, we realise that, but there are huge profits as well. Isn't it time that, rather than just not blame the EA, but everybody says, well, that's not our responsibility, but they need some serious help. Is there anything you can do as Ofwat to, demand the government don't keep the money and anything and dividends?
Can I? I mean, you answered. I mean, some very, very informed and valid points, and thank you. I was frantically scribbling down to try and deal with those in sort of turn. First of all, I do stress the point is that in the time that I've been at Ofwat, no company has been fined in a way that it's gone back to the Treasury. That's our powers. We can fine. However, we get better results from the companies by them making a Section 19 undertaking, which is we will do this by this date, and if we don't, then it's an automatic fine. So they will commit more. They will do more. And also, if they fail to deliver it, that all the efforts they put into towards doing that fall to nothing because the fine appears anyway. So I just want to stress the point is that when we use fines, I use fines in inverted commas as a yes, those are the powers. The legal powers would be that the monies would go to Treasury. The norm of casework and is a compromise deal and the compromise agreement, which is in customers' interest, so customers don't pay. I think that's a very valid point. In terms of the usual suspects, as you might say, in terms of the polluters in the river, water sector water companies are probably a minority of the overall problem compared to agriculture and industry, road runoff, and others. I'm not in any way playing down the responsibility of the water sector, but I would highlight the fact that it is a higher level problem than just the water companies. So it is, and that is outside of our sphere of influence. It's outside of our control. With, you know, there's the bit we can do, but when you come to the overall abstractions and discharges and health of the aquatic environment, then it is the agency. And you know, I don't think it would be appropriate for me to comment on their actions and their funding and their models and everything else. You've done two others, you say there. In terms of dividends, I believe Wessex do deliver, but I think you might be talking to Welsh Water, who is a mutual not-for-profit company. We could debate until the cows come home the benefits or otherwise of renationalisation and versus private delivery. But the rationale behind privatisation, there has been £120 billion invested in the sector now. It's considered to be a low risk, low return, long term investment. There is an obligation on the companies. I think one of them, I don't think one of them, I think Severn Trent has it at the moment. As part of what we do, license modifications, all of them have been obliged to maintain AAA rating, credit worthiness, so they're seen as good investments. It is one model where we've actually got external, external funding, and that funding has come from private investors, and private investors want a return. I think, that, as I said, that would be an entirely separate debate overall. And I think the other thing that you've touched on there was around, using dishwashers and urban creep and the like. One of the things that we will be looking at in the next year is Section 106 of the Water Industries Act, which is a right to connect. And I'm sure you'll all be well aware of the need for additional housing and the additional pressures of urban creep. It is, there's two sides to that coin, isn't there? Which is Section 96 places a duty on the companies to effectively deal with wastewater. We hammer them hard to say that you must be delivering what the customers want and need and expect, and the companies, I have some sympathy for it, can say we have no control over whether they urbanise, whether you pave your driveway, or whether you build an extension, and whether you put that misconnection into the sewer. We've got to deal with it. There are the number I have seen, and I wouldn't say that this is not an Ofwat number, would be to completely re-sewer the whole of the UK would run into about £140 billion, which is more than the sector has invested since privatisation, and it would basically involve digging up every street in the UK. It's just not an option.
Did you want to come back, Kate? Or...
I could make a statement about £1 billion of whatever that they've just cleared in debt for PPE contracts, but so drop notions and things like that, a bit of a pun. Thank you. Yeah, that was quite useful. Thank you.
Thanks, Kate. Anyone else before I ask Ian to carry on?
Yeah, just very briefly, Chair.
Yep.
So I was going to ask a similar question about dividends, but I've been beaten to it. The other part of that was about the holding the senior company executives to account, i.e. in their long-term incentive plans and the is that something that Ofwat has the power to do, to make sure that if you are one of the senior directors or the chief executive, that you can be held to account for this sort of stuff?
Yeah,
that's the first
absolutely.
question.
Very much so. And you forgive me, I'm not prepared for that question. But if you look on our app, there is a publication on executive pay and the expectations, and I think through each of the board assurance statements that they issue to us annually, that they are linked to performance, and we are pretty hot on that, I would say, in terms of, you know, that those companies, the board remuneration needs to be reflected in delivery.
Yeah. I guess the other question is, with the next review of the next 5-year plan, if we wanted to try and encourage Ofwat to get river cleanliness and the sort of removing or reducing or limiting or getting a measurable outcome of fewer discharges of untreated sewage into rivers and what have you, how do we, as a county council, how do we go about trying to influence Ofwat to put that as a higher priority when they're having those next discussions, and to take that forward with the water companies?
Hopefully, I'm still sharing my screen and the timeline there. Right in the centre of this year, we will publish a consultation on our methodology, and that is for public consultation. And if you have comments, then we would be delighted to hear them.
So that consultation would be the place where we as a council could go in, and councillors individually and the public and other concerned parties. Is it open? Pretty much open?
Absolutely, yeah. Right. Absolutely, yeah. And I think, you know, in through other organisations, you know, yes, you as a county councillor can put your own concerns in. As a council, you'd be delighted to receive it. But then also through any kind of NGOs or particular organisations you may be part of, anything through the you know, any kind of you know, riparian users and such forth. You know, those views will be taken into account.
Brilliant. Thank you, Chair, for that. I think I'd like to suggest quite strongly that we do have a look at the consultation when it comes out, and think about how we should reply to it. Hopefully that can be captured in the minutes. Thank you very much.
Yeah, certainly, David. And the time frame is quite good, because we will have, or will be, reported by the time of that consultation, I think. So helpful. Anyone else before I ask Mr. Pemberton to carry on to his presentation? Because I know you're somewhat time limited anyway, Mr. Pemberton. You need to be away around 3, don't you?
I do. Yeah, slightly after, I think I've got, but I have, looking at this, 5 or 6 slides more.
Okay.
And,
I can see Councillor Morgan with a raised hand.
All right. Sorry. Yeah, because I've only got 5 faces on this page. Graham, good afternoon. Sorry.
After it's all right. I'm over in the corner, I think. But
yeah.
I was interested in what Ian was saying back to Kate, when regards of obviously we understand the implication of trying to resewer the whole country, but I was seeing under the common performance commitments the risk of sewer flooding in a storm. And that's becoming more prevalent as climate change hits us even harder with these storms, especially in areas like the Forest of Dean, which is a mini version of the Welsh situation, with villages on the steep hillsides. You get these things blow, and then you get the company come out and say, well, they know the system's not adequate, and they can do about it. Oh, Ian, do they get that? How do a local authority, even down to parish level, get that out? When they got sewage running down their main street into football fields, how do they get that highlighted up to either the EA or yourselves? Is there a mechanism for that?
It's a good question.
Good question.
Good question. So, the companies are reporting those. Let's get this right. The companies are obliged to report those properties at risk of foul flooding, and they are putting in. They have done a lot of work and a lot of schemes to reduce foul flooding. Some of them, like I say, if you've then got highway drainage or misconnections, you then get into the enforcement powers of companies taking individual to get them to remove it. So that there are some mechanisms for that. I think, and I'm struggling a bit with the presupposition of the question, which is
I think the problem is, Ian, is not so much reconnections into the sewers nowadays, because most of that's tied up. Most of these building companies who build estates, they put in their swales and whatever.
Yeah.
Where historic goes in.
It's exactly
connected to sewers. There are storm systems, roofs connected to sewers before any storm systems existed.
Yeah, no,
you deal with that. That's the problem, I think, in Maine.
There's a huge issue of misconnection, urban creep, right to connect, capacity. The companies will look at their system performance, and if it is failing the standards, they're obliged to report it, and they're obliged to report the numbers of people who are at risk and what they're doing about it. I don't have the figures to hand, really. From my engineering perspective of having worked in that sector prior to joining Ofwat, the water companies do a lot. They do take it seriously, and from having joined Ofwat, the numbers there are being reduced. There are some very significant schemes being put in place. It's a risk-based prioritized process, and every house that gets flooding is ghastly. But there is a phased program for reducing them. I'm also aware of there are some places. A personal case, a friend of mine, where their property was at risk of foul flooding from their own building drainage, and the particular water company went out of their way and said, it's not our system that's flooding, it's your system that's doing this, so I think several companies will go out of their way to go and do that. One of the things which in here, the purple is the customer experience measure. The CMEX experience is one of the commitments, which is basically, are you doing what your customers want? And then if you've got customers who are foul flooded, are you going that extra mile to sort this out? And they haven't got a magic stick and they haven't got a money tree, but the customer, if they're paying, expects a level of service, and if it is failing, then there are both financial and reputational incentives to help. Bit of a woolly answer, that one, I'm afraid, but hopefully that was.
Yeah, it's a difficult one. I understand that. It's just when you get these. I got just dealt with one recently as a county councillor in an old mining village, whereby the sewers that comes down across the hillside in that village is obviously old systems. They're causing problems for many people because they blow the main drains off in the roads and whatever. It flows through people's gardens, down through the village, onto football fields. I'm just wondering. I mean, obviously the parish council who controls that village, or they're the first line of it as regards to the council chain. is there someone they can go to if they're not getting satisfaction from the water company? It must be the Environment Agency. Is that correct? Or
the first point of call would be the Consumer Council for Water, the CCW.
Okay, yeah.
I would be.
Okay, yeah.
I guess objectively, sitting on the outside, I would be quite amazed and quite shocked if any water company was not acting. I can see that the person who's affected might not think that they're acting enough and quickly enough. But, I think in
this case it was half the village.
From a helicopter view, from a regulator of the whole of the England and Wales water companies, I would be quite alarmed to think that any company has a cavalier attitude towards foul flooding.
I'll have to keep an eye on Severn and Trent then.
Great, thank you. Let me just go through these because this will probably come up with some of the things that you want to talk about. So as I've said, we set common performance commitments at PR 14, so 2 price reviews ago. At PR 19, last price review, we invited the companies to put their own bespoke performance commitments together, and there was too many. There's over 400, and it's sort of it's great that they've got that level of engagement, and they've come up with the things which are important for their customers. It's a regulatory burden for them to go and monitor and report it, and given that they are maybe slightly different metrics, they're almost impossible for us to kind of compare A to B. So somewhere between the two of 14 and 500 will be the right number of performance commitments in PR 24. And then whether or not the metrics are actually right. So, for example, in the case of Councillor Morgan's question, is it numbers of customers, events, time to respond? Is it duration? Is it the how many people had to shout to get an answer? What are the metrics there that needs to be in place? But this is current thinking. And they will be developed, and again in accordance with that timeline. We will be wanting to tell the companies towards the end of this year, these are the commitments that we'll be looking at. We will want to set a number of performance commitments, and we want you to do a certain number of commitments, and then through 2023 there may be some sort of rationalization of that long list down to a short list. And there's a whole bunch of them. The social landscape and the environment that we're operating in. I mean, the sort of economic and social landscape has changed enormously in the last year. But these will be the ones which, as I said, we will be asking the water companies to set out what they have gained and gleaned from their customers in terms of what's important, and what are customers willing to pay for. And I know from the studies that foul flooding is number one. It's the yuck factor. It's as horrible as you can get, and and customers are willing to pay for that. So that's going to be. But I would have thought that maybe, my personal opinion, maybe there will be a balance now between what we can afford to achieve in terms of river water quality and what we can afford to pay for in future years, and who should be paying for that, and how that's funded. But so there will be a number of environmental PCs. We will go out to consultation on those, and we'll expect the companies to do their consultation as well. There's two elements to bespoke performance commitments. They're either financial or they're reputational, and we've set a lot as reputational in PR19. Really, just to, you have to publish in your annual performance review. We said we will do this. We haven't done it, or we have done it and we've shown at it. And there's some challenging ones. There's some real challenging targets in there. And I think, unless no, I would wrap up at that really, just to say, I think we've covered that the way for you to engage is through the consultation process later this year. But if you have specific concerns, certainly raise it with your water company, and then and raise it to Consumer Council for Water if necessary. We have the powers to and the responsibility to look at the bills versus deliverables, yeah. How do I sum that up? Really, that's kind of what we do.
Thanks, Ian. Yeah. You could sum up by saying you do have the powers to inflict the pain gain, if that's the best way of putting it. And thank you for the detail and the presentation. I'm sure we all learned a lot from that. And before we sadly release you, I'm just going to go quickly around and see if anyone else has any further questions for you. I think looking at it, that our time frames are great because we should be ready to feed into that consultation. But anyone else got any further questions for Mr. Pemberton? I'm looking to see if I can. Is Sophie still with me?
Yeah, I'm here.
Yeah, but can you?
No hands I can see. No.
Okay. Fine. If there's no further questions, I'm going to go back to Mr. Pemberton. Thanks very much for the time you've given to us. I'm sure if members do think of anything that they've not learned from today, they can get in touch through Sophie with yourself. I'm sure you'd be happy to answer.
Of course. No, good. Well, thank you, and have a good weekend, everybody.
Thank you, and the same to you.
Thank you for your time.
Bye-bye.
Okay, members. Oh, I've lost me.
You have been removed from the meeting. This call will now be disconnected.